My name is Bart Wagemakers and I am from the University of Applied Sciences, Utrecht, the Netherlands. As an employee of the National Museum of Antiquities in Leiden, the Netherlands, I happened to meet late Leo Boer on an ordinary day in 1999. It seems that Boer had studied for the priesthood at the Pontifical Biblical Institute at Rome in the mid-1950s. In the course of his studies, he had the opportunity to stay at the École Biblique et Archéologique Française de Jérusalem for 1 year, 1953-1954, where he concentrated on studying the Bible. There he had also joined the third excavation led by Roland de Vaux at Qumran and participated in many archaeological excursions organized by the École Biblique. During this year, Boer kept a diary and took about 700 photographs. Remarkably, he never thought about his travel account in the photographs after he returned to Rome and some years later to the Netherlands. Although he had ceased to think about his photographs after he returned, Boer did make a list of the photographs he had taken while he was in Jerusalem. This included the numbers of the pictures, captions and the dates when they were taken, and moreover, Boer refers to these photographs by number in his travel accounts. Boer's account can be divided into several sections, which I will briefly discuss here. Firstly, the journey to East Jerusalem. Traveling from Rome to East Jerusalem 60 years ago was not as easy as it is today. Boer left Rome on Sunday, 4 October 1953 and arrived in Rome 10 days later. He describes very detailed the people he met and the discussions they had. Next to this, we have also photographs he made of the sites he visited during the journey. For example, this one in Baalbek. The École Biblique in Jerusalem. His stay at the Institute offered Boer the opportunity to meet well-known scholars and persons who were at the beginning of their promising academic careers. He was in touch with scholars such as Roland de Vaux, Vincent and Milik. Boer studied together with Maurice Ballet, and furthermore he spent a great deal of time with Ernest Marie Laproussa. Biblical and archaeological expertise came together at this time not only in the École, but across the whole of Jerusalem. This was an outstanding and inspiring environment for a 26-year-old student. For example, Boer had several conversations with late Frank Cross, who had just been appointed as the annual director of the American School of Oriental Research from 1953 till 1954 and was its acting director at the same time. Boer met Kathleen Kenyon twice at Tel Sultan, where she was excavating at the time, and he was guided across the Homo Carmelitanis at the Rockefeller Museum by Dorothy Garrett. Thirdly, the historical and archaeological walks. The École Biblique used to organize walks to historical and archaeological locations in Jerusalem once every 2 weeks on average. Unfortunately, Boer does not describe the walks in his diary in great detail, but despite the fact that the comprehensive account is lacking, we do have the photographs which Boer took during his visit to this location at our disposal. At the École Biblique, Father Lemoine was responsible for conducting the excursions. Once a month, a voluntary day trip was organized. Most of the excursions were rather intensive. The participants left early in the morning, traveled long distances by a private bus, and did not return until the evening. Boer's account of the excursions, of which there were 5 in total, are very detailed, but this is not a proper place to explore their content. The journeys through Jordan and Israel. During Boer's stay at the École Biblique, the Institute organized 2 extended trips. One through Jordan in October 1953 and one through Israel in 1954. During these journeys, they visited numerous archaeological sites. Boer's accounts of the extended trips are, like the ones of the monthly excursions, very detailed too. But let's have a look at the photo collection. In addition, Boer took a considerable number of photographs, about 700 in total. The films were not developed until recently. He put the films in a box, stored in a garage for almost 55 years. Amazingly enough, the quality of the photographs is stupendously good. The photo collection can be divided into the following categories: landscapes, panoramas with cities and villages, rural life, city life, religious locations, and of course, archaeological sites. He took photos of archaeological sites that he visited during the historical archaeological walks, the monthly excursions, and a journey through Israel and Transjordan. To my opinion, the account and the photo collection are valuable for archaeological research today. As Boer stated at the École Biblique, he was able to visit many archaeological sites at the time when Palestinian archaeology was at the beginning of a new phase. After World War II and the foundation of the State of Israel in 1948, a new generation of archaeologists, approaches and methods came into being in Palestinian archaeology. By visiting numerous archaeological sites, Leo Boer witnessed the results of these new approaches. In that sense, his account and photographs give an interesting overview of the state-of-the-art archaeological techniques of that time. For example, when the group of the École Biblique was guided by a Kenyan at Tel al-Sultan, ancient Jericho, during a third campaign, Boer took a picture of this skeleton that was still in situ. This picture illustrates the innovative work of I.W. Cornwall, a little-known exponent in the area of field anthropology. The remains in this picture represent several layers. In this case, Cornwall opted to use the histological technique of serial sections. He hoped that by using this technique, the relation between the remains found in each layer to those underneath would be made clear. Therefore, each layer of bones exposed was drawn to scale on tracing paper and drawings were superimposed. My second argument is that the photo collection might show aspects or details of sites that had not been recorded sufficiently enough by the professional staff at the time. A few examples. When he was traveling through Jordan and visited Aqaba on 26 October 1953, an English major showed Boer and his companions a stone with a Greek inscription that had been found by soldiers just a few days earlier. As it turns out, the students were not the first to study this inscription. Nelson Glick had encountered the block on his journey through the Aqaba area in 1936. A photograph of the block was published by him in his third volume of Exploration in Eastern Palestine. Unfortunately, due to the poor quality of the picture, it has been difficult to read the inscription. And this used to be the only published photo of the inscription, and at some point after 1953, the block dropped out of the artifactual record and has since been lost, meaning that all subsequent scholars depended on Glick's photograph. In giving the history of the piece, the revelation of this new photograph taken by Boer, it's quite fascinating, and careful study and comparison of the two photographs actually led to a reconsidered reading of this lost inscription. Second example. Among the photographs taken at Kibbutz Qumran are at least two eminent pieces taken at Loki 86, 87 and 89. Despite the fact that the function of this particular room has been interpreted in diverse ways by different Qumran researchers, the view that it has operated as a pantry of the community remains the most widely accepted theory. The discussion of the function of the room has much to do with the participants' thoughts on the purpose of the mud brick block in the center of the room. The problem is that the close-up picture of this block was not taken when the excavators had disengaged it from the partition wall in which it was found. They merely restored the block soon after its discovery with a new coat of plaster. The discovery of the charred wood on the north side of the block and next to the eastern wall was also not recorded. Despite the fact that Boer at the École Biblique was a student of biblical studies, He was expected to join the Vos's third expedition at Qumran from 20 to 27 March 1954. Boer took pictures of both the central block and exposing of the charred wood. The discovery of these photographs shed new light on the archaeological debate of the function of these loci, as has been published in PEQ. In order to bring Boer's documentation into reach of all interested parties, two projects have been set up. First of all, his photographs and account were the inspiration for 20 scholars, many of whom excavated at the sites they describe, to report on what we know today of 9 particular sites chosen from the many sites Leo Boer visited in the Levant 60 years ago. Among them are Jerusalem, Sebaste, Kibbet Etel, Kibbet Qumran, Caesarea, Megiddo and Bet She'an. With the help of Boer's photograph and accounts, the scholars describe the history of the archaeological expedition at these sites and answer questions such as: who have excavated these sites over the years? What were the specific aims of these campaigns? What were the techniques and methods they used? How did they interpret these excavations? What were the most noteworthy finds? And finally, what misconceptions did the former excavators have? This archaeological historiography, completed with several current themes, will be published at the beginning of 2014. Secondly, the volume contains a mere 70 of about 700 photographs that Boer took during his stay in the Levant. Since the entire photo collection is significant for the study of the archaeological history of this region, it was decided to make all the photographs accessible to the public, not just the ones selected for the forthcoming volume. This is why a second project was set up, the foundation of the digital Leo Boer Archive. In the database of this archive, which is hosted by the server of the American Schools of Oriental Research, you can browse through the photographs by category and by keywords. The significance of the photo collection of this former student was a source of inspiration for a new project, the Non-Professional Archaeological Photographs Project. This project aims to trace non-professional of their heirs who joined or visited an archaeological campaign prior to the 1980s, to collect and digitize their photographic documentation, and finally, to make it accessible to the public via digital photo archives. The term non-professional refers here to participants of excavation who were not part of the trained staff, but who assisted as part of their continuing education or out of interest, such as students, volunteers, reporters, and sponsors. The techniques of recording excavations detail prior to the 1980s were not as developed as they are today, and a thorough documentation took a lot of time. This is also true of the area of archaeological photography. The decisions surrounding the assemblage of the data during the excavation and their publication afterwards were usually taken by the professional staff involved, including the archaeological photographer. It is obvious that the decision taken by the staff were of great consequence for the site, as it is common knowledge that an area undergoing excavation will be disturbed irreversibly. As the discipline of archaeology has developed significantly during the last 6 decades, it is inevitable that the views on how the progress and the finds of excavation should be recorded have changed as well. All the developments that have influenced archaeological photography suggest that there may be an hiatus between what archaeologists actually recorded in the past and what we nowadays expect them to have documented at the time. It has just been demonstrated that former non-professionals may well turn out to be those who are able to fill the gap, found in our official documentation published by academic staff. Non-professionals tended to show an interest in all the divergent aspects of the site. Usually they recorded as much as possible and simply anything they were intrigued by as the best they could, even if staff decided that particular features did not need to be examined. It means that besides the official photographs taken by or ordered by the professional staff of the excavation, there must also be unofficial documentation. Unlike official photographs, which can be consulted in published reports or archives, the neglected ones taken by non-professionals are generally not accessible to the public. For this reason, the project was started. An example of fruitful outcome. We have found photographic documentation of the basically unpublished but fascinating Minoic excavation at Erchanes, near Knossos on Crete. One of the participants had even made maps of the excavations, including the location of the most important finds, which is lacking in the official documentation of the 1956 excavation. Instead of gathering dust, the photographs are now being digitized and will be accessible to the public shortly via the digital Erchanes photo archives. Despite the fact that the project has only recently been started, several reputed archaeological institutions and departments have already shown their support in this new initiative and are cooperating with the project research team in order to find non-professional documentation of their excavations. We welcome other archaeological institutions who conducted excavation prior to the 1980s and who are interested in tracing and digitizing non-professional photographic documentation to contact the project organization. It will be useful for current archaeological research to trace non-professional photographs of the past and to digitize and place them in accessible digital archives for both scholars and the general public. However, this can only be achieved with support from the archaeological world. So please follow us on our website, Facebook and Twitter, because it would make the tracing of former non-professional easier. It will be worth the effort. Thank you.
Over many decades, numerous archaeological campaigns have been organized all over the world to explore remnants of lost civilizations. For more than a century now, sites have been excavated by archaeological research teams and gradually, bit by bit, their history is told. As it is today, the staff who conducted the excavations in the past and were responsible for a proper documentation of the digs usually consisted of professionals, such as archaeologists, draftsmen, pottery specialists and preferably photographers as well. At the time, techniques of recording excavation details were not as developed as they are today. A thorough documentation relatively took a lot of time. As the field of archaeology has developed significantly during the past 6 decades, it is inevitable that the views on how progress and the finds of an excavation should be recorded have changed as well. The techniques of archaeological photography have also improved immensely over the years. And similarly, views on how to use photography in archaeology have changed. The official photographic documentation of an excavation was usually carried out by, or at least ordered by, the professional staff. But what about the photographs and films that were made by the students, volunteers, journalists, sponsors, or even royalties who joined or visited the site during an excavation as part of their continual education or simply out of interest? The photographic documentation of these so-called non-professionals tends to be ignored or forgotten. This is unfortunate because this category of archaeological documentation has recently been proven to be significant for archaeological research. They can show aspects or details of sites that were not officially recorded or not sufficiently recorded by the professional staff. Take a look at this unique photograph of a block at the site of Khirbat Qumran, for instance. This photo, which was recently found in a box in a garage where it had been stored for 55 years, is the only close-up picture known to us of the block before its restoration. Thanks to the original shape of the top being now visible, a new premise about the function of the block and the loci was possible. An area undergoing excavation is always irreversibly disturbed. Archaeology is an unrepeatable experiment, as a famous archaeologist once noted. That is why this kind of unofficial documentation of past excavations is a valuable addition to the archaeological research of today. For this reason, non-professional archaeological photographs and films from the past should be given the attention they deserve. Welcome to the world of the Non-Professional Archaeological Photographs Project. Former non-professionals may well prove to be those who are able to fill the gaps found in the official photographic documentation gathered by academic staff. Non-professional participants of an excavation and ordinary visitors to the site tended to record all sorts of divergent aspects of the site, purely out of interest. But, unlike official documentation, which is kept in published reports or archives, documentation gathered by non-professionals remains generally unknown and is not accessible to the public. The Non-Professional Archaeological Photographs Project was started to make this documentation freely accessible. The project aims to trace former non-professionals who joined an excavation prior to 1980 and to collect and digitize their photographs and films made on the site, and to place them in digital archives, making them accessible to the public. The first step for the project team is to find out the names of the non-professionals who were present at the excavations. Having established their names, we then try to trace them and contact them in order to see whether they have any photographs, slides or film which they took of the excavations decades ago, and whether the material is still in their possession and of sufficient quality. If they are indeed able to supply their photographic material, it will then be given an inventory number, name and other metadata, such as the name of the photographer, date, name of the site, and a detailed description of what can be seen on each photo or film. Preferably, the non-professionals themselves will provide these data. Once the material is archived, it is then digitized. Finally, the non-professional digital collection is made accessible to the public through digital photo archives, which can be visited via the project's website. As you can probably imagine, these non-professional photographs, slides and films may not always have been stored in the best of circumstances, which is why they need to be collected and archived as soon as possible. Moreover, most of the people we are trying to trace are now old, or possibly even deceased, which is another reason why we must act quickly. That is why we are asking you for your support, before it is too late.